Hello, dear dreamer. You've done all you need to do today. The world outside can gently fade away now. Allow your body to settle, your breath to soften. Let the tension melt from your shoulders. Let your eyelids grow heavier, dot, dot, and heavier still. You're safe, you're warm, you're home. With every breath, you're drifting deeper into a space of calm. Dot, dot. Inhale, slowly, and exhale, even slower. Let your thoughts float away like dandelion seeds on a breeze. Feel the gentle weight of your blanket. Feel the softness of your bed beneath you. And imagine, just beyond your window, a quiet forest bathed in silver moonlight. The trees sway ever so slightly. A cool breeze sighs through the leaves. And somewhere in the distance, an owl calls softly. Who? Who? Oh, oh. Dot. And now, our story tonight begins. Our story sets sail on a velvet night in a quaint little village. The stars glittered like scattered sugar across a navy blue sky, and the moon hung low, ripe, casting soft light on cobblestone streets and wooden rooftops. In this village, quiet and curled between wild hedgerows and whispering trees, stood a curious little shop. Its sign creaked gently in the breeze. Elowin's Apothecary of Unusual Remedies. The windows were round and a bit foggy from within, glowing with the flickering amber light of a hearth. Tiny glass bottles lined the shelves, filled with glowing powders, twinkling herbs, and curious things that smelled of sweet rain and old stories. And inside, dot, 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 tending to it all, was a woman named Elin, an apothecary, yes, but also a gentle keeper of secrets, of whispers from the forest, and dreams from the stars. She was tall and kind-eyed, her silver hair coiled in a loose braid, and on her shoulder, as always, sat a great barn owl named Sorrel. Sorrel was no ordinary owl. He was ancient, perhaps older than the forest itself, and he carried with him, always, a knowing stillness, as if he remembered every dream ever dreamed. Tonight, Elowin stood at her counter, a parchment spread before her, and a wooden bowl filled with shimmering powder in the other. Moon dust, collected only on nights like this, when the moon was whole, round, and humming. She leaned closer to the hearth, stirring the dust gently, and as she stirred, the powder caught the firelight and sparkled like stars suspended in warm honey. Tonight is the perfect night. Sorrel, she whispered. Someone out there needs this dream. Sorrel blinked slowly, his feathers rustling like silk. He gave a low, approving hoot. Then, in a fluid motion, he hopped from her shoulder to the windowsill. Outside, The wind danced with the ivy vines, and the moonlight painted the garden in silver lace. Eliwan carefully funneled the moon dust into a small glass bottle, sealed it with a cork, and tied it with a ribbon of forest green. She whispered a blessing over it, one older than words, and placed the bottle in a satchel. Then she turned to Sorrel. "Well then," she said softly, "let's take this dream where it needs to go." With a rustle of wings and a flutter of cloak, they stepped out into the night. The door of the apothecary closed behind them with a soft click, and the village street lay quiet and sleeping under the stars. Through the winding forest paths they traveled, their way lit. Each step was gentle, the kind of step that doesn't wake the mushrooms or startle the foxes curled in their dens. The wind carried scents of damp earth, wild rosemary, and wood smoke. The trees above swayed with creaking lullabies, and tiny golden eyes peeked from between the leaves. Forest spirits, curious and kind. Sorrel flew ahead, gliding silently, his wings brushing the air like sighs. Eliwan followed, her cloak trailing like a shadow kissed with dew. They stopped, at last, at the edge of a meadow, and there, nestled beneath a willow tree, was a small cottage with a round blue door. Inside, a little boy named Alaric lay restless in his bed. His dreams had been troubled lately, filled with distant thunder, cold winds, and heavy clouds. Though he didn't quite remember who, but Eliwan knew, and Sorrel did too. She approached the window, careful not to disturb the night. She opened her satchel and drew out the tiny bottle. Its moon dust shimmered with soft promise, a dream of warmth, of reunion, of comfort. She uncorked it slowly and let the powder drift on the breeze, right through the open crack in the window, and into the room where Alaric slept. The moon dust swirled through the air, soft as a lullaby, curling above his bed in tiny constellations. It brushed against his cheek, kissed his forehead, and settled around his pillow in a glowing mist. His little shoulders relaxed, and his brow, once furrowed, smoothed into peace. And in his dream, he saw the face of his mother, smiling, warm, her hands glowing with starlight. She took his hand, and together they walked a path of moonbeams. Eliwan smiled. Sorrel gave a low, satisfied hoot. Their work here was done, for now. Whispered Outra for first segment, and so the owl and the apothecary faded back into the night. Through shadows and song. Through mist and meadow, carrying dreams like candlelight for those who need it most. And you, dear dreamer, as you rest in your own soft bed, can feel the shimmer of moon dust, too, settling gently across your thoughts, weaving calm into your dreams. Sleep now, softly, easily. You are safe. You are warm. You are held by the hush of the forest and the wings of the night owl. After the dream had been gently delivered to Alaric, and the boy's face settled into peaceful slumber, Eliwan and Sorrel made their way back into the forest, becoming warmer and filled with the scent of blooming night jasmine. Somewhere, a brook babbled softly beneath a mossy bridge. The world was still very much awake, not loud, but listening. They paused by a grove of moonflowers, each one opening in slow, sleepy spirals. Their petals were pale as snow, and they shimmered faintly with dewdrops. Eliwan crouched to gather a few. "These will be useful come the next dreaming moon," she whispered. Sorrel blinked. He tilted his head, listening. Eliwan listened too. And beyond the rustle of leaves, beyond the hum of distant stars, came a voice, faint, like wind through a hollow reed, but steady, a call. Not in words. Eliwan stood. "Sorrel," she said gently, "we're not done just yet." This time, the journey took them further, beyond the familiar woods. Few came here anymore, not for fear, but reverence. It was the oldest part of the forest, where trees leaned in close to whisper, and moss grew thick and soft beneath one's feet. The path was lined with ancient stones, each carved with gentle spirals. Runes whose meanings had been forgotten by most, but not by Eliwan. The wind here didn't blow so much as breathe, and with each step, the stars above seemed to grow brighter, clearer, as though this place, this sacred glade, enormous, silver-barked, with its limbs trailing like silk, and beneath it, nestled in the roots like a sleeping child, was an old badger. His fur was peppered with gray, and his eyes, though kind, looked tired. He'd lived a long life, full of stories, but now he dreamed no more. Still, quiet in a way that left no echoes. Eliwan approached slowly, kneeling beside him. She reached into her satchel and withdrew a new bottle, this one filled with moon dust, and with a soft exhale, let the powder spill gently across his fur. A hush fell over the glade. The trees paused, as though waiting. Then the stars twinkled just a little brighter, and the badger stirred. He sighed, softly at first, then deeper. A sigh like someone sinking into warm water after a long day. His eyelids fluttered, and though he did not wake, a smile curled across his face. He was dreaming again. Eliwan remained beside him for a time, humming a lullaby passed down from generations of forest keepers. It was a tune that had no words, only warmth. A tune that reminded the wind to rest and the leaves to hush. Sorrel perched on a low branch nearby, eyes closed, feathers puffed in contentment. When the moon had climbed higher, painting the world in pools of silver light, Eliwan rose. "There is one more," she said softly to the night. Sorrel opened his eyes, and without a word, they turned east. The journey now took them beyond the forest entirely, across moors that shimmered with mist. Each hill rolled like a wave frozen in time, blanketed in heather and the occasional sleeping hare. The air grew cooler here, not cold, but crisp, like the breath of dawn. And at the very edge of the moor, where the earth dipped into a narrow valley, stood a lighthouse. It was peculiar, for there was no sea nearby, just tall grass, wind, and time. But the lighthouse stood still, its lantern glowing with a soft, golden pulse. Inside, an old woman named Anwen sat alone. Her hair was long and braided with feathers. Her hands were calloused from spinning and weaving, and her eyes, once bright as stormy skies, were now dimmed by memory. She'd spent her life tending to the stars, charting their paths, listening to their music, recording their stories in spiral-bound books no one else could read. But lately, the stars had stopped speaking to her, and in the silence, sleep would not come. She sat in her chair, rocking slowly, fingers moving through the rhythm out of habit, but her mind far away. Ilywin arrived at the lighthouse just as the wind changed. Sorrel landed lightly on the iron railing and hooted once, low and clear. Anwen looked up, startled. But then she smiled, softly, like remembering a long-forgotten lullaby. Ilywin, I wondered when you'd come. Ilywin stepped inside. She didn't speak at first. She simply opened her satchel and withdrew a final vial. This one shimmered with flecks of starlight, real starlight, moon dust, yes, but also something older, something that remembered the first light, the first song. The first song. Anwen reached out her hand, and Ilywin poured a single drop onto her palm. It melted instantly. Not wet, but warm. A warmth that filled her chest, her heart, her breath. Anwen leaned back into her chair. She closed her eyes, and she dreamed of stars dancing in spirals, of constellations laughing, of her younger self, barefoot and wild-eyed, sailing through skies with ink-stained fingers and pockets full of wishes. Outside the lighthouse, the lantern flickered once, twice, then shone brighter than it had in years. And in the sky above, the stars, those quiet, watchful stars, whispered outro for second segment. The night was nearly over, but Ilywin and Sorrel still had miles to wander, dreams to scatter, silence to soothe. You, dear dreamer, can rest easy now. The moon dust has reached you, too. Feel it gently brushing across your thoughts, slowing your breath. Sleep is near. Close your eyes and let the next dream begin. Before the sun stretched lazy fingers across the horizon, Iliwan had already completed her nightly ritual, with a wicker basket in one hand and a small knife at her hip. She hurried along the forest path, her cloak billowing behind her like a raven's wing. The air thrummed with the energy of awakening, and the trees whispered greetings as she passed, their branches laden with fat, dew-kissed berries. For Eliwyn, the day held a familiar rhythm. Knead dough in the morning, brew remedies at noon, tend the herb garden in the afternoon, and gather under the watchful gaze of the elder tree. Her days were filled with the simple tasks of running her apothecary, tending to her village's ailments, and weaving magic into everyday life. But tonight, something stirred in the forest that was both unsettling and familiar. A disturbance in the natural harmony that demanded her attention. But for Eliwyn and Sorrel, there was one last task before dawn. They returned to the forest, its ancient arms opening to welcome them home. As they passed beneath the arch of oak and ash, Eliwyn paused. Something was different. The breeze had shifted again, becoming still, almost reverent. The leaves no longer danced in playful invitation, but hung heavy, rustling only in anxious whispers. She gripped Sorrel's outstretched talon, grounding herself against the unsettling hush. She murmured, her gaze scanning the darkening woods. The forest, usually brimming with nocturnal symphony, was unnervingly quiet. Even the scurrying of field mice seemed to have ceased. It was as though nature itself was holding its breath. Then Eliwyn heard it, a faint pulsing from deep within the forest, a glow. She listened intently. The sound was barely audible, yet undeniably present. Rhythmic. She closed her eyes. She let the silence speak. Then she smiled. "It's time," she whispered. "The grove is calling." Sorrel gave a knowing blink. Together, they turned toward the hidden path, one that did not exist until you needed it. It wound between birch and bramble, growing narrower with each step until finally they reached it. This grove was older than the apothecary, older than the village, perhaps even older than the moon itself. It was a place where lost dreams settled, not broken dreams, not bad ones, but dreams that had simply been forgotten, left behind like childhood toys or songs without words. They shimmered faintly in the air, like distant melodies you almost remember. And in the center of the grove, a great stone bowl stood filled with dust far finer than Eliwyn had ever harvested. This was ancestral moon dust, made not just from moonlight, but from memory itself. Eliwyn approached slowly. She placed her satchel upon the mossy earth and drew out the 3 empty vials she had kept. Each one had once held a dream. Each one had now fulfilled its journey. She set them in the bowl, and as they touched the dust, they glowed faintly, a light like soft candle flame in a winter window. Then the grove sighed. It was not a sound of wind, but of gratitude. The dreams had returned home. Eliwyn knelt by the stone bowl. She bowed her head, her forehead almost brushing the edge. "Thank you," she whispered. "To those who dream, to those who remember, to those who still believe." Sorel flew above the grove in silent circles, his wings catching stray beams of moonlight. And then, as if time slowed, something unusual happened. A fourth vial appeared in the bowl, delicate, empty, wrapped in threads spun from starlight. Eliwan gasped gently. The grove had made a request. A dream needed to be delivered, not just for sleep, but for healing. Eliwan picked it up with reverence. The moment her fingers touched it, a vision flooded her mind. A child, not in the village, not even in this land, but far away, in a distant realm beyond rivers and mist, a child who had never truly dreamed. Not because they couldn't, but because no one had ever told them it was safe to. Eliwan rose slowly. She turned to Sorel, and he landed beside her. "I think we'll need the star path," she said, her voice full of awe. Sorel blinked once, then twice, and let out a long, deliberate hoot. The star path was only walked once every few decades, when the veil between waking and dreaming was thin enough for souls to travel without being lost. It was not a place, but a way. And to walk it was to walk the sky. Elian stepped back into the clearing. She raised the vial to the heavens, and as she whispered the old words, once taught to her as a child, the stars above began to shift. They rearranged themselves, subtle at first, then more clearly, until a winding trail of constellations formed, like stepping stones made of light. The star path was open. She mounted a tall stone in the grove's center, the vial clutched to her chest. Sorel took to the air, his wings glowing faintly with dust from the bowl. Then, with a leap and a whisper, Eliwan stepped into the sky. She selected a few, a wisp of valerian root, a petal from a night-blooming rose, a pinch of powdered bluebell pollen, and began to grind them in her mortar, adding just the right touch of lavender oil. The scent rose slowly, sweet and earthy, a perfume that coaxed the edges of your thoughts into stillness. She closed her eyes as she worked, letting her fingers follow the memory of dreams. "Each blend must be balanced," she whispered. "Not too light, not too deep, just enough to lead the dreamer where they long to go." Sorel, now fully alert, watched from his perch with golden eyes half-lidded in serenity. He rarely spoke aloud, but Eliwan always understood his gaze. And this time his eyes asked, "Do you feel it?" Eliwan nodded softly. Yes, something in the air had changed. Not troubling, but stirring. Something approaching. Not a person, not a creature, but a moment. The kind of moment that doesn't announce itself, but simply arrives. She finished grinding the dream blend. Then she walked to the back of the apothecary, where a narrow staircase led up to a small observatory. Fewer still had ever seen it. It was in T just for watching stars. Though stars could often be seen dancing across the high-glass dome above, it was also for listening, not with ears, but with the heart. Eileen stepped inside. The walls were lined with shelves of maps, celestial, emotional, magical. A large round table stood in the center, its surface etched with constellations that glowed faintly in rhythm with the phases of the moon. She placed the dream pouch on the table and touched one of the glowing star runes carved into the edge. At once, the air shimmered. A projection of the skies unfurled above her head. Not just of the present. Lines of stardust traced shapes in the sky. Arcs, spirals, crossroads. And in the center of it all, a new constellation flickered to life. Small, gentle, not in fear, but wonder. "The next dreamer is close," she murmured. Sorel glided into the room, landing on the sill where a warm shaft of light spilled across his feathers. He tilted his head. "You feel it too, don't you?" Eileen asked. The owl gave a single, slow blink. The projection faded, but the sensation lingered. That quiet pull of destiny. Eileen tucked the pouch of dream herbs into a small satchel lined with crow feathers. She reached for her cloak again, this one embroidered with silver thread, the pattern woven to mirror the skies. Then she turned to Sorrel. "We'll go at dusk," she said. "This dream, it wants to meet the night." The day passed slowly, as most peaceful days do. Villagers came and went, some needing balm for sore hands, others seeking something to calm a worried mind. Eileen greeted each with the same serene grace, offering not just remedies, but presents. Her words were soft, her gaze steady. She knew that the greatest medicine was often being seen. As the sun dipped low in the sky, turning the clouds apricot and rose, Eileen stood at the apothecary threshold once more. The wind stirred her cloak. The forest beyond the village shimmered with golden light, and the first stars began to blink awake above. She looked to Sorrel. "Ready?" He gave a quiet flutter of agreement. Together, they stepped into the deepening twilight. This path was new, not unfamiliar, but newly formed. Dreams often shaped their own roads, sometimes along streams, sometimes through tunnels of wind-carved stone. Tonight, the path wound gently through a grove of junipers, their blue-green berries glowing faintly like tiny lanterns. Each step Eileen took was deliberate, measured, peaceful. The moss beneath her boots sighed in welcome. The trees leaned just slightly toward her, as if listening to her heartbeat. She did not hurry. Dreams never respond to haste. Only rhythm. Only intention. At last, she arrived at a clearing. The moon had fully risen, now high and pale, not full, In the center of the clearing lay a small circle of stones. Ancient, worn by time and dreams, a natural cradle for magic. Eliwen stepped into the circle. She knelt and placed the satchel before her. Then, slowly, she drew out the dream pouch. She did not open it, not yet. Instead, she closed her eyes and waited. The wind quieted. The night deepened. The forest held its breath. Then a sound, light, like distant chimes, growing louder, closer, and into the clearing came a fox, but not a normal fox. This one had fur, the color of midnight velvet tipped in frost, and its eyes shimmered with stars, tiny constellations blinking softly in their gaze. Calm, sure, as if it had known her forever, she bowed her head. "Guardian," she whispered. The fox sat before her. Their eyes met. And in that silence, a conversation older than language passed between them. Eliwen offered the pouch. The fox stepped forward, touched it with its nose, and instantly the dream was released. It didn't spill like dust. It blossomed, of music without sound, light without source. A vision of a child yet to be born. A soul that would one day walk between worlds. A dream walker, a heart listener. Eliwen's breath caught. She felt tears welling in her eyes, not from sorrow, but from recognition. The dream was not just for someone else. It was for the world. A promise, a seed, planted now, to bloom in its time. As the last petals of starlight shimmered away into the air, the fox turned, its paws making no sound on the moss. It paused once at the edge of the trees, looked back at Eliwen with glowing eyes, then vanished into the shadows between the trunks. She closed her eyes, the image of the fox imprinted behind her lids, not as a memory. Sorrel swooped down from the canopy above, landing gracefully beside her. His wings stirred the air softly, and he gave a quiet hoot, a sound not of alarm. "Yes," Eliwen murmured, "it is done." For now. She reached into the satchel and removed the now empty pouch. It had changed. Once embroidered with moon thread, it now glimmered faintly with frost. A gift from the fox, perhaps, or from the dream itself. She folded it with care and slipped it into the folds of her cloak. Its magic had not ended, only shifted. The journey back to the village was quiet. The forest at night holds a very particular stillness, not silence. Owls whispered in the branches. Moths fluttered near blossoms that only opened in moonlight. And small deer stepped gently through ferns, pausing to lift their eyes to the stars as if listening for lullabies. Eliwen walked slowly, her hand grazing the bark of trees as she passed. The path glowed faintly now, not from moonlight, but from the resonance of fulfilled purpose. Dreams leave echoes, even when unseen. By the time she reached the village edge, the night had begun its slow fading, not in darkness, but in quiet light. The deep indigo sky had softened, and the stars had begun to blink out one by one, like lanterns gently extinguished by invisible hands. Ailiwan stepped through her apothecary door just as the first blush of dawn crept along the windowsills. Inside, the warmth greeted her like a sigh. Her shop was still and safe, fragrant with herbs and quiet wonder. She removed her cloak and hung it by the door. The embroidered stars along the hem still sparkled faintly, as if reluctant to forget the sky. Sorrel returned to his perch, tucking himself into his feathers for another well-earned sleep. Eliwyn went to her writing desk. It faced east, so she could always greet the dawn as she recorded the dreams. She opened her dream ledger once more, and on the next blank page she wrote, "Waxing moon, a fox of stars, a dream for a child unborn, delivered at the stone circle in the juniper grove. A quiet promise placed into the wind. Let the world soften and the dream take root." She paused, quill hovering. Then, with a gentle curl of ink, added, "The fox knows." As she closed the ledger, a quiet hum pulsed through the shop, but from within the very walls, as if the apothecary itself was breathing a sigh of contentment, and perhaps it was. She moved through the shop now, lighting a new candle from the hearths. Its flame danced joyfully, casting long, soft shadows across rows of bottles and bundles. She gathered her tools, mortars, vials, satchels of herbs, and began to prepare new blends, some for restful sleep, others for creative dreaming, still others for journeys through ancestral memory. She let the herbs speak. She listened for what was needed, not just what was asked for. Sorrel stirred again by midday, his wings stretching slowly, his eyes brightening with the new light. He flew once around the room, then settled beside Ailiwan as she sipped a cup of steeped lemon balm and elderflower. They sat together in silence for a long while, listening to the soft sounds of day. A new rhythm was beginning, not hurried, but rising, like the heartbeat of a dream yet to bloom. Eliwyn felt it. So did Sorrel. Out there, beginning to call, a whisper, a question, a longing, not ready yet, but stirring. She smiled softly, cupping her tea in both hands. "We'll be ready." Sorrel gave the faintest hoot, and the apothecary walls, full of echoes and time, seemed to agree.